We are streaming. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Life Edge. This is our pre-show. We're going to start the recording in about 30 seconds. We are live on YouTube, and here we go. Let's start the show recording in 3, 2, and 1. Hello, everyone. I'm Rick Zanotti, and this is Life Edge, because life just doesn't have to be mediocre. I am joined today by the doctor in the house. It is Dr. Susan Nash. Hey, Dr. Susan. How are you today?
I'm great. Hello. And we have a kindred spirit today for our guest. He also would like to travel to Mars.
I know. Two of you. Wow. Okay, here we go. Here's our intro. We are back. Susan, would you like to do the honor of introducing our Martian-bound friend?
Absolutely. Our guest today is Mike Rains. He's a senior geoscientist, and he's very interested in lots of different things about geosciences and astroscience. And I just thought I'd say, first of all, welcome, Mike.
Hi, thanks, Susan, and thanks, Rick.
And also I'd like to ask you a question. How did you get interested in science?
I got interested in science in general. A young child had a fourth grade teacher that let us go to a lot, and there was a few books that really caught my attention. One I happened to get for Christmas this very year. That was the very book that started me interested in science. I happen to have a copy of it right here.
Oh, this is good.
So this little book, Sprocket, a Little Robot, was my first introduction to science fiction, and that's how I actually got interested in science. Didn't get into geology for quite some time after that in college, but that is what got me interested in science. And you might have noticed on the cover there, they have a flying saucer, so that also got me interested in space travel. And then, of course, onto all the wonderful shows like Star Trek, that brought all of that together for me, and science fiction merging, traveling to Mars and other places like that as a possibility. That's how I got into science in the first place.
Now, from my angle, I couldn't see the name of the book. Which one, or the name of the movie? What was it?
It's Sprocket, a Little Robot.
Ah, okay.
I love it. So who's it by? Who's the author?
The author is, Key is his last name. Let me flip it open here and get his first name. Alexander Key.
Excellent.
You know, I think you're in good company, because I'm not sure about Susan, but I think she was a science fiction fan. I was definitely a science fiction fan, and you're right. It's very motivating.
It is. It opens your mind to all kinds of possibilities. Some more realistic than others, but it gives you a chance to think about all those things and what could we be doing? What should we be doing?
Yeah. One of my favorite movies growing up, and this was, I think, from 1958, it was Forbidden Planet.
Oh.
That was when they introduced Robbie the Robot, which was really just a moving prop, but it had lots of lights at the time, and it looked cool. But that was all about, and that had an interesting theme, because it was science fiction with philosophy, if you will. Somebody once said it was really The Tempest, Shakespeare's The Tempest, done in a science fiction theme. Interesting story, because on The Tempest, I think the father and daughter were stuck on an island, and then the people come to rescue them by coincidence. And this was sort of the same idea, but it was such a good science fiction movie, because it talked about our inner demons and how that destroyed the civilization of the Krell Empire. It was just a lot of fun. It was very well done for its time. The technology and the graphics were mind-boggling. It was just so good.
Yes.
Still watch it every so often. Every chance I get, I own it. I own the movie, and I think I have a streaming version on Amazon. I still watch it a lot. It's fun. Never get tired of it.
Yeah, the classics do. I mean, that's why they're classics, because they bring that back to you. they reinvigorate you. They make you reimagine things again, even though you've seen that show or that episode or that movie many times before.
Yeah, so Susan said you are planning to go to Mars, maybe with her. She wants to go. She's planning on it. I think she's going to hitchhike on a spaceship to Mars. She's got to go. She's got this sort of conspiracy thing going on with SpaceX. She wants to move near the base. That's the first shot. Then she wants to sneak on
No,
to a
I
ship
never
and nobody's
admitted to
watching.
you that I wanted to sneak on.
Not making it more interesting, Susan.
So you have your own spaceship ready to go now, Susan?
Well, I'm thinking. I will say I did look seriously at purchasing land in Brownsville, near where they're building the launch pad. But then I realized, well, maybe that's not really the best place to have. I thought there'd be like a housing boom, but then I didn't really think about the fire aspect of liftoff.
And you have to be really careful on your timing. Make sure you get to the craft and inside before the fire engine goes off.
Yeah, timing is everything.
Yes, timing is everything.
Well, I think it's so interesting though, because like science fiction and robots, etc. I just love the entire continuum. So like how the imagination explores what's possible and what's not possible. And when you were looking at science fiction, how did you make that jump from science and travel to like Earth and geology?
To me, it's a couple of different things. They had geologists in Star Trek episodes, for example, and they featured a couple episodes with them. So that got me thinking about planets and going to planets. What would planets be like? And that led to what is our planet like, and what can we do with our planet? What are our responsibilities for this planet?
Oh, that's really interesting. So, I mean, so many of the science fiction utopian worlds very quickly turn to dystopias. So, I like what you're saying about being responsible and how we should caretake our planet. What are some of the things that you see that are the most important things now to caretake in the planet?
I think the most important things really are what we are doing with our resources, and are we preserving those, using those to the best ability, or are we wasting those? And if there is some waste, can we reduce that waste? Can we eliminate the waste?
Oh, I like that. Well, and that's a lot of what you're doing now, right?
Yes, that is a lot of what I'm doing now.
Uh-huh. You might talk a little bit
What I'm
about
doing specifically is working in old existing oil fields and trying to get more oil in the same fields, as opposed to trying to find a new place that hasn't had any oil removed from it yet and start from scratch. So this is like a reduce, reuse, recycle option for oil field and for recovering what we already have discovered.
I love it. It's so inspiring.
And Mike, that's fascinating, because Susan was telling me that they pump carbon dioxide into the old wells, and that somehow causes it to kind of rebirth itself, if you will.
Yeah, that's a way to talk about it, to express it. As a matter of fact, I have a visual aid that I brought for that very purpose. Maybe we could talk about it right now. So I've got a jar here with oil in it, and then I have some water with blue coloring in it. I'm just going to mix the two. And this is what anybody who's cooked spaghetti has probably noticed. Oil and water do not mix.
No.
Water is usually what causes the end of an oil field's life. You are no longer able to get that oil because of the water. I take that same sort of setup and I put it in a porous media. You can see some blue coloring down here around the bottom, and you also notice some blue. Let me get the camera in the right spot. Then notice some blue where the water is stuck in the. What you do in a water flood, which is a secondary recovery option, is you try to mix water into the reservoir and push the oil forward. And you can see that that leaves a lot of separate entities of drops of oil here and there, drops of water here and there, and they're not really mixing very well at all. So what CO2 can do is it provides a method to make these fluids act as one, and then you can push those from one well to the next. Now, I do have a few slides that we could go through at your convenience, and we could talk about some of these things if you'd like.
So Clark's going to load up one of the PowerPoint slides.
I think this is really interesting, and I like the way that you're describing it because it's easy to visualize. I think a lot of people still think of oil as being in big lakes under the ground.
Yes, I think a lot of people do think of that.
Well, I think what's fun also is this is a Mr. Wizard episode, which is even more fun. and what you're showing is basic science, which is even more incredible how it goes back to the basics.
Yes, it does. It goes back to the basics.
That's really fun. I mean, it's amazing. Who came up with that?
And this is probably about as wizardy as I'm going to get for today. But I think it does help to demonstrate when you can see the two different fluids and how they don't interact. And if you're trying to use one of those fluids to push the other one, how that could cause some trouble.
Huh.
So really, that's the key of the CO2 is eliminating that discord between the two fluids. And so what we're showing here on this slide is the condition of CO2 in different pressures and different temperatures. So in some cases, it's a vapor, or gas. In other cases, it's a solid, it's frozen, like dry ice, for example. And then in the third case, it's liquid. So there's a couple of different things that we can do with CO2, different situations or scenarios we can use to help CO2, or to use CO2 rather, to help us. If we move to the next slide, I just have a little blue box up in the top corner, and that's kind of the typical pressure and temperature ranges that you expect to see in most oil fields. This particular graph doesn't quite go all the way through the oil field ranges, so I projected a little blue line through that box. And oh, by the way, this is available on the internet. I think your users probably can see the website there and the reference for it. So this is a PhD dissertation figure.
Nice. So it looks like when you pump in CO2, do you pump it in as a liquid or as a gas?
It could be either, and that's the two that we have the options of. It depends on your temperature range and your pressure conditions in your reservoir, whether it is going to be a gas or a liquid. And you can basically split the methods that you can use this into these same two categories. Gas is generally called immiscible flooding, and the liquid portions are generally miscible flooding. It's not exactly the same lines, but they're approximately the same. So the two different scenarios have different techniques and different things that they do with the oil to help recover more oil. The immiscible fluid is the gas phase, and that's where you're getting some recovery efficiency by basically touching that oil with the CO2 and breaking off the lighter ends, the richer parts of the oil, and pushing those forward. This graph shows how much recovery you can expect from different scenarios as you change the pressure in a constant temperature. This is from the USGS, this particular slide, and the squares are showing areas of non-miscible or immiscible gases. And then as you get closer and closer to liquid conditions, you move up that graph, and where you see that breakover and the symbols turn into circles, that's the miscible or liquid phase of CO2. So immiscible means it's a gas phase, they're not mixing together, and miscible means it is a liquid phase, and also that liquid is in the condition where it can mix with the oil and water in that system.
Well, you know, the other fascinating thing, and I'll be slightly cynical about this, is that this solves the carbon dioxide problem that the politicians have made up. So as a result, now you're putting it to great use, and you're coming up with new things for this. I'm being snide, but anyway,
Yeah,
this is
that is a silver lining to all of the research and effort that's gone into CO2 lately.
it's really pretty fascinating. How much do you think they'll recover of oil in spent wells?
Well, in typical or an average condition, you might get maybe 30% of the oil under primary conditions if you have a pretty good reservoir and very well connected reservoir. With CO2, you could add another 10% on the top of that. With well flooding before CO2, you might get another 20 to 30%. So you're getting somewhere in the range of 50%, half of the oil that was originally there.
That's amazing.
With the CO2, as opposed to maybe 30% without anything.
So I'm curious. I haven't heard a lot of talk about this, at least in, well, forget the media, but I haven't even in the science journals read too much about this as something coming up or something. So ideally, with all the drilling we've done throughout the years, this is a way to really completely resuscitate the industry.
Yes, I think CO2 is a big project for future development. Maybe not the only phase. The Shell really added a lot of reserves and a lot of technology that we didn't have before. It's going to provide a lot of resources in the future. But CO2 is also a resource. It has its own limitations, though, but those are more about infrastructure and availability of CO2 itself.
Sure. But that's fascinating.
Right.
It's incredible. And the possibilities, I mean, we're talking 50% of all the drilling we've done. That's an enormous amount of reclaiming.
Yes.
It's
We still have a lot left in the ground, and not every reservoir is a candidate for CO2.
Yeah, love that.
But you can get more out of what you've already got, 10 to 15% extra beyond everything else that you've already done.
That's great.
Well, here's another question, too, and then this is, to me, what are the challenges for the future. One is the supply of CO2, right? So
Right.
it's, there's a little bit of a shortage right now, and not all of the candidate wells can actually get the CO2 they want.
Yes, that is correct. And there's also an economic problem with the price of oil being so low. It takes a long time for you to recover your money in a CO2 flood because there's a lot of investment up front that has to occur. And then, of course, the reservoir itself takes some time to respond. So I have a slide toward the end of our group that talks about that. But the point is, it's not for everyone, and it takes a while to get there.
So what do they have to invest in?
You have to, the infrastructure is the biggest thing. You have to have the pipelines to get the CO2 from wherever your source is to wherever your field is. You have to bring your wells up to a good standard because CO2 is a corrosive fluid, and you can't just use old well bores that have certain grades of steel that maybe are very resistant to compression but very susceptible to corrosion. So there's a lot of investment up front that goes into making your wells and your field prepared. And then there's also the processing plants itself with CO2 from the other gases and fluids and recycle that CO2 for use again.
So when you talk about there's a certain time constraint involved in this, how long is that time constraint on average?
On average, you're looking at least at wells in the Permian Basin. You might not see your first response for 6 to 9 months after you've made all of your investment and started a program in the field of your choice in that certain well. It could take as little as 6 to 9 months, and that might translate into 18 to 24 months before you make your money back that you've invested in that individual well or that group of wells, as we call
It's
it.
challenging.
But to me,
And-
that sounds like
yes.
a short time frame if you really think about the big picture. It's not that long.
It's not that long,
Yeah.
but companies a lot of times are looking at what is our stock doing this month and this quarter.
Sure.
Well, the other thing, too, I remember that there was a company in Oklahoma named Chaparral. They had a great project to take CO2 from a power plant to construct a pipeline to take it to a field that was depleted. And it was a great concept, but then the timing was terrible. It was in 2008, and the market collapsed. Then it started to come back a bit, but then lately the prices of oil and gas have dropped. So it's when we were talking about timing is everything. Timing is everything in everything.
Yes, that's true.
But it also seems like even though the timing may be 6 to 9 months or longer, what's the time to find a new well, to dig a new well, to find new oil resources? It may even be a lot longer than that.
Yes.
That's a really good point, Rick.
Yeah, look at some of those offshore Gulf of Mexico projects that take 10 or 15 years to come to fruition.
So this is
That's true.
for 50% of what was originally in the well. This is a lot faster, a lot cheaper.
That's true, especially if you already have your boundaries of your fields defined. You don't have to worry about that. And if you have some infrastructure in place already, maybe you can modify it instead of starting from scratch.
See, I think this is exciting. That this is a really, I think, brilliant way to get resources back without investing enormous amounts of time, effort, and money. So I see this as a win-win just from what you've been saying. Okay, I'm sold. Let me know who's doing it, and I think it's a good investment.
I agree.
It does seem like that, but it does take a lot of money up front for all the pipelines, the plants, the facilities, the new well bores.
Right.
But in times like this, when you can get to a point to stop your investment and just keep your CO2 flowing, it also has the upside of it keeps producing for a lot longer than...
Well, there's also another upside in our volatile world where you could be dealing in an area that may be oil-rich today, but it's insane and bombed out tomorrow. You've just lost oil wells. So if you've got existing wells that you have control over that aren't manipulated by whatever groups, whatever that live there, you've got a strategic advantage at this point.
Well, I have a question. Okay, so it's in the LA basin. We see very, very deep wells with multiple zones, extremely prolific, but now a little bit depleted. Are those types of unconsolidated sands good candidates for CO2 flood?
It depends on the temperature and pressure there. The thing that we're not seeing in that original graph that we looked at about the improvement in recovery is that as you get higher and higher temperatures and pressures, it takes more and more CO2 to recover the same amount of oil. So there is a breakover point, and it depends on exactly how hot and how high a pressure those depleted wells are. But the fact that they're unconsolidated sands does not disqualify them.
That's really interesting.
And if you look if you look at a lot of our mountains, a lot of them used to be volcanoes. So at one point there was a lot of hot over here, and of course no volcano is truly extinct. So hard to say what that would do. We live in California, so we see it all the time. We have a big volcano, ex-volcano, just not far from where we are, and I keep going. One day it might go. You never know.
Perhaps if we could take some of that CO2 from it, eliminate some pressure and give you a little longer time frame.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's actually fascinating.
Or maybe we could find some helium. Have you read about the helium discovery in Tanzania?
Oh, I haven't heard about that.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that cool? They found it in the Rift Valley. Apparently, it's under a lake in volcanics. And I think it must require a rift. Maybe not the kinds of volcanoes that you would find in California, but it's fascinating because they were saying that we were basically almost out of helium. We were 7 years away from being out, and they found enough to keep us going for another, well, they say 20 years. I don't know how they came up with that number.
Yeah, that's kind of fascinating to me because my hometown is Tampa, Texas, which is not far from Amarillo, the former helium capital of the world.
That's right. In fact, I think that most of those helium plants, well, you still see them just north of Amarillo, but I guess, is the helium depleted there? I don't know.
They are still in operation, so I think it is depleting, but not completely gone.
That's fascinating.
That is. Well, we are just about at the end of our time. Susan, would you like to ask your question?
Okay, here's the question we always ask. Okay, Mike, what do you think it is in your life that has given you an edge or made you have a life edge?
I think perseverance and dogged determination probably are one of the best things that have helped me out. Get a hold of something and don't give up. Keep trying. Keep working with it. Do what you can.
I really like that.
Yeah, and having that curiosity to keep going.
Yes.
That's great. Well, Mike, this has really been, this was kind of exciting today. My mind's whirring on all these possibilities that make so much more sense than some of the other things I hear people talking about, that just, they're pie in the sky, but they're not necessarily realistic. This sounds like a really great idea, actually.
Very practical.
Very
You can just,
practical.
overcome a few hurdles.
Yeah, and like you said, there's a little bit of upfront infrastructure development, but after that, 50% is an enormous amount. That's actually quite large. So I'm sure there'll be investors who can figure that one out and say, "Ooh, this could be." And we're not talking that long a time frame. When you said 6 to 9 months, maybe up to 24, think of how much we used to wait to get these things.
Yes, that's
I mean,
true.
20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we just waited 5 years, 6 years, 10 years for everything. Now,
Yes, having a field that's already developed reduces a lot of the risk. I mean, it's not 100%
Right.
risk-free,
Right.
but you do have a lot of parameters that you can investigate with your existing wells and not take all of the risk of everything.
Right, and also as you're developing the revenue from the from existing wells, then that goes into the next 6 to 9 months, and you start getting it into. It's sort of like getting paid invoices. Once you're in the cycle, you get paid regularly. So it's getting past that 6 to 9 month short-term, not too bright cycle of people wanting to just a quick return on investment. That usually doesn't work too well. And then after that, it starts kicking in. I mean, this sounds like a really good investment, actually.
Yes,
I
it does.
think a
And for
cautionary
the end of the
tale
life of the
though.
field, you can halt almost all investments, just reuse the CO2 that you already have, pay electricity for compression, and your income stream continues on.
I love that. That's
Wow.
great.
Well, that's really good. I think the key to me is like the cautionary tale. You have to know your reservoir.
Yes.
And if things don't work out, you'll both be in Mars.
Yes. Yes, we can all hitch a ride.
Hey, Mike, this was a real pleasure. I'm glad we got to meet, and I know Susan and you know each other, and this is great. This is, I think, an interesting show. It makes people think a little bit. Some of the things that are out there and where we could be going with things, rather than just a lot of hype and noise and this and that and pseudoscience. This, to me, is just great.
Oh, me too. And thank you so much for taking the effort to make the little props. Those were fantastic.
I hope you could see those quick.
Yeah, those are great.
Yeah.
I'm an ex-Mr. Wizard lover, so.
Well, thanks again for inviting me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you for coming on. And if you're watching the show on Vimeo or YouTube, please subscribe. Let us know what you think. We're always looking forward to your feedback. Mike, have a great 4th of July weekend. Same to you, Susan, and we will see you all next week on Life Edge. Take care, everyone.
And thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Thanks, Rick.